Okay, so sorry I started that video a little bit early. Hello to anybody watching in the recording land, and there I have my first live viewers. Hi guys. Okay, I'm going to switch around here. So I wasn't expecting to be on quite so quickly. Hi Jodie. I'm not going to say hello to everybody, but I was here yesterday and I came across this little area near where I live. And I thought I'd use this as a really good metaphor for how we form habits and how we break habits and how we can forge new pathways. I should have. I had a great plan for how I was going to start this talk, but anyway. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to flip the camera around again and just kind of point some things out here. So what's going on? Here you go. So what we have here, is obviously we have a path here which goes down to the Cirencester Amphitheatre, which is just over in that area over there. It's an old Roman amphitheatre. And what we have here is the council have tried to put up a fence here to stop people from cutting up the hill like they do over there. And of course what people have started to do is that they have started to walk around the fence and forge their own pathway up there. And as you can see, there's a little white sign down there which basically says, please don't go this way because we're trying to stop erosion. And I thought this would be a really good learning opportunity. And yesterday, as I was walking down here, I was about to take a photograph of this area so I could post a post about it. And I bumped into a guy called Mark who was coming down the hill towards me. And it was brilliant because he sort of said, "Oh no, I'm really worried about why you're taking photographs and what's going on there." And he got sort of anxious about the fact that I was maybe a dog enforcement officer or somebody from the council worrying about why he was walking across the place he wasn't supposed to be walking. And we got into this whole big conversation. It was absolutely fantastic. I was here for probably an hour or so, and my phone battery ran out while I was here. So I was going to do a live yesterday morning about this while I was standing here. So I've had to come back out again today to do it again. And that's what I'm doing here. So the reason we get into old habits, and sorry, I just also wanted to say that I'm also doing this on my podcast. So some of you will be listening on podcasts, I've just realised I was going to explain this a little bit more carefully. So hopefully the image that I've just taken, hey Jade, will be part of the podcast, and the descriptions I'll have made make more sense because so for the podcast viewers, there's a path going around to the left there, which is hopefully we'll see in the photograph, and there's a fence kind of blocking people from going across the grass, and then people have gone around the fence to go up the grassway anyway. This is a classic example of how we form our own pathways in our own brains. A couple of years ago, I watched a lecture from a guy called Professor Timothy Bliss, who's at University College London, I think, who's doing a study on the neurons in our brains. And he's I'm not sure exactly who it was who found it, but a thing called long-term potentiation, yes, which is where the neurons in the brains actually get fixed the number of times you repeat an action. So this is a beautiful example of that, where there's been a repeated number of people walking down this pathway behind me here, where the council have actually built a pathway now, because it used to be just mud and grass and so forth. So the council have actually built a pathway here to help people get round into the amphitheatre behind. Of course, human beings being human beings, quite a lot of people have walked straight up the hill to the top of the hill there with their dogs and have started to wear a pathway through. And you can see, again, in the photograph, you'll see this, so the podcast people won't be able to see this while I'm talking about it. But there's a clump of white flowers either side of the path where people have walked up the hill. And so that's a great example of people forming habits. So this is what happens with us when inside our own brains, where we repeat an action over and over and over again, we get stuck into habits. Examples for you guys, if you're listening into the podcast, will be if you hold your hands out like this and then bring them together and then put your fingers together like that and then look at which thumb is on top. So bring two hands out together and then bring your hands together so that your fingers interlock and see which thumb comes out on top. And then try and do it, put the other thumb on top and see how that feels. It's kind of a weird sensation because it's quite difficult to do it. In the same way, if you try and uncross your arms a different way, that's also a difficult habit to overcome. Also, something you may not have thought about is which sock you put on first when you're putting socks on in the morning, or which trouser leg you put in first. As you start to think about these things, you'll notice that you do these little patterns, and how you do your shoelaces, for example. Some people do it one way and other people do it in a different way. And if you were to try and teach somebody else how to do their shoelaces up in the way that you do it, if they do it a different way, it's really, really difficult for them to learn the new way, learn the new pathway. So what's happening here is that the council are trying to force people to take the pathway that they have built to the left here and stop people from going up the pathway where they want to go. And of course, that's fine. People are finding that really, really difficult to do because they kind of want to go the pathway they want to go. They want to go the way they're used to going, the way that feels most natural to them. And that's what happens inside our brains as well. We form these habits that fix us in a particular way, so we get used to that pathway. So if you've got a habit that you want to break, smoking, overeating, watching too much TV, doing too much Facebook, for example. I had a friend posting yesterday saying, I can't stop Facebook flicking. What am I doing? I need to stop. How can I stop going through Facebook all the time? And of course, the way to do that is to force yourself to do a different habit. So again, which is what's happening here. So they've tried to put a fence up here to try and stop people from going on the old path over there. The same thing will happen around a building, but obviously this fence here is high enough, and you saw some of the photographs I posted yesterday. This fence here is high enough to stop people from climbing over it, but unfortunately it doesn't quite go far enough along to stop people going around it. And so you can see quite clearly that people have gone around it on the left-hand side here. I know the camera's flipped, sorry about that. If I do it this way around. Hey, Samantha. There you go, Jade said. She always puts her left sock on. Yeah, exactly. If you try and do it the other way around. So my friend Jade Lewis has just posted that she puts her left sock on first, and if she tries to put the right one on, it's really, really difficult. Left sock on first. Yeah. And so you can see here going around the right hand. That's actually the right hand side. There you go. just goes to show. When I was talking about it in reverse on my camera, it was the left hand side. So here you go. So right hand side. So people are walking around the right hand side here. And that's how those habits are formed, and that's what happens in our brains with that long-term potentiation as well. So the neurons in our brains will have certain pathways, and once you've fired that pathway off enough times, then it does this thing called calcification, where it actually fixes that route through your brain, and it makes it really, really hard then for you to break a new path, which is again what's happening over here. So obviously this fence needs to come further up here to try and stop people from going around the side of it, and then maybe they'll walk around for them. And if I walk down the hill, you'll see another example of this. I have probably 2 or 3 examples of this thing going on in the future. I've only got 2 people watching. This is crazy. Lots of people coming on, but not talking to me. So, by the way, ask questions. Feel free to ask questions. Anybody who is watching. Yeah, we've got 5 on there now. What was I saying? Yes. So it's that long-term potentiation in the brain that gets fixed. And if we want to try and break that, we've got to find something else to replace the habit with. We've got to try and find another way of making us do something different or new. So, for example, when we're talking about, I'm going to flip the camera around while I'm talking for a second here now. No, not. Yes, there you go. So you can see now, as I'm walking down here, you can see I'm taking the regular path. Hey, Gemma. This is going to be really interesting for people on the podcast who can't see the comments and things. I'm not quite sure how I'm going to do this in the future, but anyway. So here's another example right here. So you can see that they've put another fence up here. They tried to stop people going around, but they haven't put it really far enough, so it's going around here. But you can see what is happening here, though, is that some people who have kind of a conscience to a certain extent, or more of a conscience perhaps, are following the rules, but some people are breaking the rules. So you've got some people who are kind of rebels and breaking the rules and going around the fence. Which is perfectly fine. It's people's prerogative to do their own thing and forge their own pathways. So here you go, forging your own pathways. So if you're looking to break a habit, what you need to do is try and find something that is going to replace that habit rather than necessarily just stopping it. So you need to find something else that's going to replace that habit, or as we saw there, try and put up a big fence to try and block yourself from going and doing that habit. So like some sort of punishment for not doing it. So here's an interesting little thing as well. Again, not going to work really well for the podcasters. But at the end of that walk that I just walked down, you may have heard me, oops, yes, this, there you go. At the end of our walk down here, you can see that it turns into a bit of a muddy patch here. And obviously in the winter, the more rain that comes down here, this gets muddier and muddier and muddier. And then you have to kind of walk around it to avoid the mud, which is just a bit of a nightmare, really. And of course, weirdly, the council have just kind of stopped here, and then they put this kind of grass meshing down here, which is supposed to help a bit, and it does help a bit, holds it all together a little bit, but I can't quite understand why they haven't put this path up to the top of the hill over there by the dog bin, because of course you've got dogs, people walking their dogs here, picking up poo, and they've got to put the poo in the bin, and you're making it really difficult for them to actually get to the bin at this point, because when it's really muddy, this is really difficult to walk along. Anyway, so again, so human beings, we tend to forge our own pathways, and you need to forge your own pathways. So if you want to do stuff in your future that is different from the way you've been doing it before, you do need to do this breaking through new pathways. So here's another good example. Actually, I shall reverse up a little bit here, because I want to show you another little analogy to this thing here. Hey Phil. Okay, so over in that direction there's a wood that's off to my left as I got to the end of the path for the podcast listeners, and again I'll take a photograph of this as well a little bit later on, but if I wanted to just take the shortcut up this route and over the top over there, you can see that there's quite a lot of vegetation that I'd have to bust through and break through to get over the top there. But that might be a quicker route, it might be a better route, but it's quite a hard slog to get through there. And as you can imagine, if the council had put that fence up there and it had all grown up, remember when I was talking earlier about the two clumps of white flowers? If those white flowers were all the way across that area, then it would make it very, very difficult for people to want to walk through all those flowers and all that grass and everything. And so that would be forging your own pathway, a new pathway. And as we come around the corner here, you'll see exactly what people do along those lines, which I'd actually forgotten about. So as I walk around the side here, I'll give you a quick glimpse of the amphitheatre as we go past, so you can enjoy that. Again, I'll come back and take photographs of this for those on the podcast, so you can see it online. I could create an online program for you, I suppose, don't I? Okay, so that's the amphitheatre over there, and this is a little story about the amphitheatre. Okay, so here we are. So we're coming up to another area here, which goes into Querns Woods, I think it is, in Cirencester. And again, you can see here that the real path that we should be taking is down to the right-hand side over here. And the council have put up a barrier here to try and stop people from going over the top of the hill. But as you could also see, is as you go down here, because it's at the bottom of the hill, it gets really muddy down the bottom there. And so people there, therefore, will cut across the top of this little hill here. And again, you can see they've got a fence up, comes around the side here, but you can see that people have started to walk through the left-hand side over here and over the top. And the muddier the bottom bit over there gets, the harder it gets to walk down there, the easier people find it to break new paths through the grass over the top of the hill over here, because it's just easier to walk through the thick grass than it is through the deep muddy mud, slippery mud over there. And so it's another example of forging new pathways in brain. So if you can imagine that this is your brain, all these grasses and so forth down here. And by the way, just make comments if you're watching this and you recognise any of these things in your lives and things that you do. But if you imagine this is your brain, and that's the habits that you have on the right hand side here, goes down into the muddy bits there. Obviously at the moment it's not muddy, so it's absolutely fine going down there. But as it gets muddier and muddier and stickier, so this is my friend who was talking about getting on Facebook too much. So she's suddenly recognising that getting on Facebook is causing her a bit of a problem in her life now. So it's getting really muddy in her life. She goes, I need to stop doing that. So what she needs to do, of course, is forge a new pathway to the left of the fence here, through the thick grass, through this difficult path, which is to stop getting on Facebook every single day. Or for hours a day anyway. And so I made her some suggestions as to how she can do that with an app called Quality Time and another app called App Block. I'm not sure if they're on iPhone necessarily, but I'm on an Android and that's what I have. So I'm going to flip the camera around again so you can see me. So I have those two apps to try and stop me from using Facebook too much. And I just realised that I've not turned those apps off, which is a little bit of a dangerous thing when I'm in the middle of a live, because I don't know how long I've got left on my limitations for Facebook while I'm doing this, so I hope it doesn't just cut off while I'm talking. But I'm nearly finished now. So this is what I was saying is this is a really, really cool example of our brains and how we need to forge new pathways. So as I was saying to my friend, you need to cut through this grass on the left here which is the hard job now to stop that habit, breaking that habit that you don't want to do anymore. And obviously, so that's basically it. So talking about breaking new habits, in summary, I want to suggest to you that if you need to break a new habit, you need to find something else to replace it with. You need to imagine in your brain that you've been doing that habit, like we've got here on the right hand side, for years and years and years, and it's forged a pathway. And to break that habit, you're going to need to repeat over and over and over again. Actually, I'm going to flip around again. So what you need to do is repeat something else in place of that habit over and over and over again until it becomes the habit. So a little example from my life. A few years ago, I was living in a flat where I had a little bit of a damp problem, just to summarise here. And I was using an electronic, what do you call them, squeegee thing to suck all the air, the water off from the shower. And I was doing that every morning before I left the house. So I'd have a shower, then I'd squeegee everything down, and then I'd leave the house. And then one day, after a couple of months, I was running a little bit late, and I'd had the shower, and I got out and I got dressed, and I wanted to run out the door, but I hadn't squeegeed the shower. And I felt this really, really strong urge. So this is where sort of OCD stuff comes into it. I had a really, really strong urge to need to scrape down the shower and get rid of the water, because I didn't want to leave the house with the potential of smelling damp when I got back. So that was a habit that I got into, that I was then found it really hard to break that habit of scraping the walls down. So that's a little story from my own life. And we all have these little things. And like I said, if you're struggling with anything OCD related, then that's where that can come from. It's a little bit of a habit that you've got into that has then forged these fixed pathways in your brain. And then your brain then kind of follows the really easy path that we just showed earlier on, and it then becomes really difficult for you to forge a different path through the vegetation of the rest of your brain, or across the fence that's been put up somewhere else. Actually, I've just noticed there's another little fence here, which is quite funny because I hardly even noticed this before. People used to go between these trees on the right hand side of these trees here. And now you can see they've got the fence there, and quite clearly that's blocked people from going through there. And now people don't go through there at all anymore, and it's all growing up and becoming quite vegetation. So nobody's on my live anymore. I saw a great live yesterday from somebody whose name is temporarily escaping me. And he gave some great tips about how to engage well on live. So the fact that I've got nobody left watching live is kind of annoying. I should have said hello to everybody, I suppose. I'm going to say wave at everybody now, but they've all gone off now. Thanks all for watching, everybody who was watching. And I hope you found it helpful and useful. Please do give me any feedback if you did, and I will talk to you all again later, I suppose. I'm going to do this podcast roughly every week. It'll be available on the website and obviously on iTunes at some point later on today, because I will finally publish it. This is actually episode 4 of my podcast. And this is also one of my 15 steps to everyday happiness that I will be doing. So it's kind of part of a series, I suppose. And yes, so I'm not sure what number it is of my 15 steps, but it's what I call the day part. So I split it into three sections. So I do a 5 in the evening, 5 in the morning, and then 5 during the day. And one of my during the day things is looking at your habits and whether they're helpful or unhelpful for you. So okay, that's my live. Hopefully it was useful and helpful and made some kind of sense. I kind of started it a little bit earlier than I would have planned, a bit better. But hopefully it came across okay. It's one of those things that you just have to do and then get better later, as my friend Rob Moore would say. Okay, that's all from me for now. I will leave you with a view of the amphitheatre. Actually, no, I'll leave you a view of this this brain behind this because it's quite an example of how our brains work.